Hi guys, and welcome back to That's Mental and another episode of Mental Health and the Brain. Today we're going to be talking about the Paleolimbic brain, which is part of the limbic system. What I've circled in red here, if you can see, is the limbic brain or the limbic system, I should say. And the amygdala is part of it. And the most important thing to know about the limbic system is that it is related to our emotions. What I find really fascinating about the brain and what I want to share with you is the ability that it gives us to understand why we're behaving the way that we do. Sometimes we have behaviors in certain situations that we just don't understand. I'm sure it's happened to many of us that something happens and we have a reaction and afterwards we're like, whoa, why did that happen? Sometimes we might know that we acquired these behaviors as children, but we also can't really put our finger on it as to why we're still repeating this behavior today or why it's still part of who we are as adults. Trying to regain control on yourself and on certain situations is one of the ways that you can work on improving your mental health. Now, I use the word control, and I don't mean by that you have to sort of seek to always have control. Actually, part of having a better mental health is learning to know when to let go. However, they also say focus on what you can control. And what we can control the most is ourselves. And that's really what I mean here. When we can understand the way we act, then we can do a lot more to learn to work on that and become more adaptable to certain situations. When I say working on your mental health, I also use that term loosely because at the end of the day, mental health is a journey. It's one that we're constantly on. It's constantly evolving. And that's why I'm breaking down some key concepts that I found most interesting and relevant. In the first video about stress, we covered the reptilian brain and the primitive response that it has and how it exists to protect us and alert us to danger. We also talked about how the reptilian brain is connected to stress and our stress response and the impact that it has on our mental health. Today, we're going to talk about the Paleolimbic system. This part of our brain is interested in our position as an individual as it relates to the group, right? So the group in this case is society at large, but it can also be our family or our peers and our friends and our friendship circles. Obviously, as a social species, our survival depends on us being accepted by the group. So this part of the brain is related to our position in the group, understanding how we fit in, and ultimately creating harmony. Our position in the group is defined amongst two axes. One is our self-confidence, and the other is confidence in others around us. Our perceived position in the group is defined at 2 years old, which is super young. And thereafter, it doesn't change much, although it can. That's why when this part of our brain is switched on, our actions are based on a sort of power struggle along these two axes. A lack of self-confidence leads to submissiveness with the other, whereas too much self-confidence leads to dominance. Similarly, not trusting others can lead us to feeling victimized, but also paranoid and in fear a lot of the time because we don't trust anyone. Whereas too much trust in others can also be risky. It can result in us being used by others as they constantly taking advantage of this trust that we have in everyone else. So let's put this into context of day-to-day life. If it was easy to achieve the perfect balance between being too submissive and too dominant, I think we'd know by now. There wouldn't be any conflict and everybody would be walking around feeling great about themselves all the time. Unfortunately, I think many of us can recognize ourselves in one of these traits that I just described. And in fact, it's quite probable that your position will change depending on who you're with and who's around you, so that you're not always in only one of these roles, but you're taking on several of them and it's changing depending on the situation. The challenge is that when you're a too submissive person, for example, and this is your dominant personality trait as it were, you can end up feeling frustrated and upset because you're repressing your needs, you're maybe not expressing them. Like I said earlier, you feel like you're being taken advantage of all of the time. And this is difficult for your mental health because you might be harboring a lot of repressed emotions within you, which can lead to a lot of bodily tension. And it might be that one day you suddenly explode and let it all out and people around you don't know what was going on. whatever. Either way, holding in these emotions for too long is not good for you. From a mental health perspective, this means that you won't feel fulfilled because your needs won't be met, because you're not able to express them fully based on your desire to fit in with the group. Not only can it lead to repressed emotions, but it can also lead to you feeling sad, neglected, and maybe even left out of the group at times. And most importantly, it can also be really damaging to your self-esteem and continue to lower or just simply lower your self-esteem, which in itself makes it really difficult to cope with any mental health situation. You might even feel an inner conflict with yourself because you want to speak up, or you know that you should speak up, but you're just not able to do so. And that might be a real struggle going on within you. And once again, inner struggles where you're feeling very torn between something you know you should do and what you're not doing, this is also very difficult from a mental health perspective. It could lead to a lot of self-doubt, a lot of questioning. On the other hand, being too dominant means that you can push people away and that you can end up being alone in your ivory tower and feeling isolated. And while some people may enjoy the power and that feeling of having power over others, at the end of the day, because we want to belong to a group, being isolated because of this dominance that you have is not a good thing, as you will end up all alone and will have no one to turn to in case you need to. And it goes against our natural desire of being accepted by the group at large. Being alienated because of this dominance may also prevent you from creating deeper ties with people, which once again is super key to good mental health. It's been shown that having deep connections, close friendships, you don't have to have a ton, but at least one or two is really helpful when you're going through a mental health struggle, to know that you've got someone that you can reach out to and talk to. Now, I know that these descriptions are really simplified, but I just wanted to give you a quick overview of what's happening and how the Paleolimbic system works and influences the way we think, the way we act, and ultimately our mental health. As you all know and will have recognized subconsciously from experience, like I said before, our position switches depending on the context that we're in, who we're with, and the group around us. This impacts how we feel around other people. For example, it impacts how we feel around people. I mean, for example, have you ever been bullied by someone? I think, unfortunately, most of us can say that we have been. This is a classic example of that power struggle, of the fitting in with the group, of the dominance versus submissive personalities, and how that act is playing out between two people. So when it comes to this part of the brain and our mental health, it's important to understand how it's affecting your relationship with yourself and with those around you. Know that relationship struggles that you might have, and I use the term relationship in the broad sense, could be very well related to this power struggle. Any inner conflicts that you have with yourself might also be related to this power struggle, like I described in the beginning. Sometimes you might feel really torn between how you usually behave in a certain situation you're in that's different than usual, and it just doesn't fit, just doesn't work. And this is very uncomfortable to sit with and difficult to know how to navigate if you're not aware of this, if you're not aware of your dominant personality trait, or if you're not aware of how you can sort of navigate that and use techniques to actually reassert the more natural part of yourself. Of course, it's a lot more complicated than that. There are obviously the added layers of personality that are built on top of how this limbic system is reacting, but it helps to understand this basic concept and realize that you're not crazy when you're experiencing this type of discomfort and wondering what is going on. Some of this is out of your control. It was a concept that was formed very, very early on in your life at 2 years old, which is super young. So understanding that your perceived position doesn't change, but it can be changed, is important. Anybody who's worked on self-confidence issues will know that you can increase your self-confidence, and this can make a difference in how you enter interactions with other people. So you can definitely build on self-confidence. You can definitely learn new skills, ways to communicate, stand up for yourself. So it's not that this position is fixed for life. The most important thing is to develop the awareness of it so that you can start to work on it. The great thing is that now you know why increasing your self-confidence is important. And it's not just for some vanity reasons that you might be seeing in the media. It also has to do with how good you feel with yourself when you're in group situations, your ability to navigate them, and how that's going to support your mental health to be in a better place. That's it for today. I hope you enjoyed it. Don't forget to stay tuned for the next episode.